Hello and welcome to A VO's Journey. My name is Anthony Pica. This show is all about helping the new and upcoming voiceover artists grow their business, sidestep all the crazy things that I seem to step on. I hope you're having a great day. We've got some exciting things to talk about. This morning I talked about breath control and I gave you 2 tips. And I want to dive more into this topic to the video today because I really feel like as beginners, it's something we struggle with. I know I can remember I was always out of breath. And I don't know if you are in that similar situation, but when you do voiceover work and you're trying to record and you're like, right, you're always out of breath. We're going to talk about how to get better at breath control and some tips, all right, and tricks that you can use. Okay, so before we get started, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Also, make sure you hit the notification bell so when I do post a video, you know that I do. Also, check out the link below to A VO's Journey Elite Academy. I'd love to have you. We are offering 50% off the first month. It's a wonderful place to come if you're looking to start and grow your voiceover business. We have live coaching, pre-recorded courses, an incredible community. So we'd love to have you come check it out. Also, if you are in the market for a voiceover and you need a voice actor, check out academyvoices.com. We'd love to help you out. We do free auditions. You can download them, share them with your clients, and we're here for you. Okay, so let's dive into this topic today. Breath control. Like I said, if you were anything like me, I was out of breath a lot, and I struggled with doing, voiceovers where I was reading something, and then all of a sudden, in the middle of an idea, I had to breathe. And I thought at a period of time too, I went through a period of time where I thought that breathing wasn't actually a bad thing. Okay, and not to be confused with saying breaths are bad, because breaths are not bad. But breathing in between ideas, that messes up the thought process that we're used to and the point a lot of times that authors or messages are trying to relay. So it's our job to work on our breath control, and what I want to do is give you some tips and tricks. The first thing I like to do, we'll try to keep this really on point. First thing I like to do is I like to, in my warm-up session, I do like to take deep, full breaths, right? At least 3 of these, where I like to do something like really expand your lungs, pull in breath. Sit up straight, shoulders back, head up. I always like to think posture is very important. We don't talk about posture a lot. I mean, I've talked about it a little bit more here and there when it comes to physical voice acting, but here's a little thing about posture. Posture is important. I love my professor in college always used to say, imagine that there's a string, all right? There's like a string attached to your head, okay? And it's and you go to pull it up. Right, and that's a great way to get your posture, and then you just let the string fall and put your hand down, right, and it gets your posture up. And having correct posture, elongating your body like that, keeping your head up, it allows you to really pull in air. Okay, really get that breathing, feel that air coming in. It will really help you expand. This is very important to you being able to really talk effectively and not feel like you're out of breath. Now, I don't want you to feel like like you have to, I'm talking really loud. We're not doing that. We're just, because this is an interesting feeling, right? Like when you do that and you breathe in, what do you feel? You feel a rush of endorphins, right? Because it's, bringing oxygen to a lot of your body that might not have been getting as much as it needed. And so it really gets you alive and awake, ready to go. So being alert is part of that, all right? So this is something that you can do. You practice taking in air, right? Pushing those lungs. Really trying to take as much as you can in. Pushing it out. It's really good. Now so the second part to this is speaking from your diaphragm. This is something that I learned just beat in my head, especially as a singer. As a specific type of singer, too. right? I was more taught to do more classical choral work and ensemble work, not so much as a soloist, and not so much as a soloist as today as we hear on the radio and things like that, but more so as someone who is singing long verses and things like that. So a lot of that was beat into me about singing from your diaphragm, really bringing in that breath. Okay, feeling that in your diaphragm and being able to elongate the time that you can sing, because just like I was talking about before, about the using making breaths in weird places. All right, the same thing with music, right? We specifically want to have breaths in certain places because of the ideas, right, and the phrases that are spoken through music as well. So anyways, I don't want you to think that, because part of some of the voiceovers that we do, it's really good to constrict your throat, which we would never do in singing, all right, because we want to open everything up. But sometimes, and that's not naturally how we speak. Most of the time what we speak is we constrict our throat, all right? And a lot of times we speak like this, all right? Or because especially when you're excited, you tend to constrict a little bit more and your voice pitch goes up some because you've got more air and excitement. When you're not as excited and you're kind of just relaxing, it's kind of more like this, right? I'm just like, hey, I'm just hanging out, having a good old time, right? My posture's changed and stuff. So again, that's where I was trying to say that, using your diaphragm is important, but it when we go to actually do voiceover work, utilizing your posture and different parts, like I said, like the throat constriction and things, can actually make you sound more natural, because than it does when we're trying to maybe do a commanding speech of some kind. Right now, there are voiceovers for that too, and we're doing something inspirational, but most of the time we don't do that. Okay, we're just doing like I'm doing now. We're just talking normally, with emphasis, but we're talking naturally. Okay, so there's one way to work on it, though, is getting yourself used to taking in breath and speaking. All right. Now, another tip. I find it very helpful to practice long phrases. And there's nothing better than turn of the 18th to 19th century financial books. I had a client once who would hire me to do public domain financial books from like the 1890s to 1920s. Oh my goodness. These people wrote like one sentence was 7 sentences. Okay? I'm sorry, 7 sentences was one sentence. That's how they wrote it. So when you and it was all like a singular idea. So I had to really force myself to read this idea, and it should have been like 4, 5, 6 sentences, and it was 1. So I had to really push myself over and over again to read it. So I was practicing taking in breath. I was practicing not being out of breath because I had to force myself, and it was very uncomfortable for a while. And also, I had to learn how to sound when I was out of breath like I wasn't out of breath. Right? That's a little trick too. Like, when you get to the end and you're like, oh, I'm at like the end of the breath, and you're trying to get it out. and then you take another breath. Well, as you practice that kind of thing more by getting very long phrases and pushing yourself with it, you'll find that you can actually train yourself and your vocals to make it sound like it's not like that. Does that make sense? But it's important for you to practice on long sentences. And that's a big key. And it helped me so much practicing on long sentences. Another tip, one I spoke about earlier today in the morning and the coffee time, was the pushing out all your air right before you speak. I'd mentioned that I'd heard this somewhere from Nancy Wolfson. And so basically what happened was she said, push out. But usually this comes from, doing like a short commercial spot. But pushing out all your air and then you take a quick breath and you start. And I think what it does is it just gets that out of your mind already, that you're thinking about breathing, you're thinking about all this stuff, and it gets you out of that mindset. Okay? Speaking of which, the next thing is focus. And I think of all of the practice and all the things that we do, your focus is about 80% of the problem. What I mean by that is so much, especially when you're new, we're focusing on the wrong things. We're going more into the mental side now, that we were just working on the physical side of practicing. But the mental side of this is focusing on the right stuff. So what I mean by that is, when you're reading something, you need to focus on what you are saying, not how you are saying it. If you focus on how you're saying it, your mind is going to, you're just going to be constantly thinking about your breath. You're going to be constantly thinking about your consonants. You're going to be constantly thinking about pitch variation and, what am I doing here? And you're thinking about all of the wrong stuff. Your focus should be on you actually thinking about what you are saying. What is the information I'm relaying to you, right? And what you'll find is, when you do that, you'll actually start thinking, wow, this is really interesting information that I'm relaying to you. And this is important, and this is really important. I find it important. You're almost inquisitive while you're reading. It's an amazing switch between, in your mind, just thinking, how can I make it sound interesting, to what am I actually saying? And what you will find is, when you do that, your mind, your body takes care of everything on its own. Right? You don't have to worry so much about the breaths, because they'll take care of themselves. The next tip is one that helped me the most, and I struggled with the most, and that was learning to read ahead while I was talking. I've told this story a couple times, but basically I got this idea because I was really struggling. Every other sentence I was screwing up a word. I really felt like I just constantly was having trouble reading out loud. And I thought, and that was causing me, in my opinion, to have issues with, sorry, my phone's blowing up, have issues with being able to not breathe and speak clearly. And I'm like, why am I having problems? I know how to read, but I was struggling. And what I found was that I was struggling reading ahead, knowing what was coming next. And because of that, because I didn't know what was coming next, my mind was like, well, we need a breath. We need to stop. We need to recharge, because I didn't know the idea. I didn't know when the period was coming. I didn't know what was happening coming next. This is one of the biggest things, if I could get you to work on, and challenging, but it's important. Work on reading ahead. Really work on reading ahead. Work on when you're reading and you're reading out loud, you start reading 2 or 3 words ahead, 4 or 5 words ahead. I got this idea from an old speed reading book I bought long ago. I wanted to be a speed reader. And in the book, it talked about focus, start when you're looking at a passage, start to broaden yourself, force yourself to start reading ahead, looking at more than just the words that you're focusing on, right? Taking in more of it, the ideas, the things that are happening. And what you'll find is, after time, now it's going to feel very uncomfortable. I want to be upfront. You're not doing it wrong. It's going to feel very uncomfortable. But what you'll find is, yes, you can do it. And all of a sudden you'll be like, oh my gosh, reading's easy. It's insane. I can't promote it enough, but it will blow your mind. Okay, but force yourself to read ahead. I'm telling you, it will shock you how good. You'll all of a sudden you'll be like, wow, this is great. I can read without messing up. And for me, when I was first starting, especially, that was so amazing, so amazing. The last tip I want to give you is more on the technical nature. The better you get at this, especially working your DAWs, what you'll find is that even if all your breathing, if you're perfectly fine and you feel okay, you're still going to have breaths. And there are still times to leave them in, and there are times to take them out. Even if, and even if you feel like you have excellent breath control, you're still going to have to remove breaths. You might have to lower the volume on some breaths. You might have to, you keep some breaths. You might realize that there's a phrase that the two phrases should be closer together, not further apart, or further apart, not closer together. And a breath is in there, and you want that breath to not be there. You remove it, change what you've done, and now you have something better. That's a part of what we do as well. That's the wonder, that's the gloriness of recording instead of doing it live. Because you can record and then you can go back and manipulate it. I mean, there's not a demo alive that has not been manipulated. It's the whole point. And you might not have ever said it exactly the way the cadence is on the demo, right? You might have said the phrases further apart, but because of the demo spot, because of how it sounded, they were brought together because of the time. And now all of a sudden you hear this thing, you're like, wow, that's great. And we know clients can sometimes want something that didn't actually exist, but that's another conversation. The point I'm trying to make is that, you do have that last part to all this too, which is the technical part, and use it, learn to use it to your advantage. Okay. And sometimes you don't need to get rid of breaths. You just need to lower them. I want to point out something about the suspension of disbelief, and then we'll call it a video. The suspension of disbelief is this idea where when we go to tell a story, perform, do an audiobook, explain their videos, whatever we're doing, even commercials, we ask people to suspend their disbelief for that period of time and let their imaginations go with us. Okay? Suspending the disbelief meaning like, forget that I'm a narrator narrating this book in some studio somewhere and you're in your car listening, and just imagine with me the story I'm telling you, right? And enjoy the world and the ideas and the thoughts and the protagonist and antagonist and the story. Enjoy it. That's the suspension of disbelief. We as performers don't want to rip people out of that suspension of disbelief. So breaths can do that. All right. By having them over the top. So in audiobooks, we typically don't remove a lot of breaths if we get good at it, because breathing is natural. It's a part of us telling the story. It's part of us talking. So it's not actually a bad thing at all. It's actually welcomed. But if you're breathing and you're talking, it's like that breath for no reason other than you were just out of breath, someone listening to that be like, well, that's kind of weird. Why did they breathe like that? Do you see how that's brought me out of the suspension of disbelief? Because now I'm thinking about why the narrator, the person who's telling the story, did that breath. We don't want that. We want to keep people in that suspension of disbelief. So that's where keeping a breath too loud in a long-form narration can be problematic. Okay? Now, there's parts where part of breathing is part of it, like breathing loud, but I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about generally in one-off situations. But listen, I hope that this has helped, and I think that this is one of the most challenging parts when you're starting out. If you were like me and you struggled with not screwing up and actually getting work done, especially if you're doing a lot of audiobooks, because being able to read well, clearly, effectively, without screwing up can be the differentiator from spending an hour to 4 hours recording something, right? It makes a lot of difference. So I hope this is helpful. Please feel free to leave comments below on your thoughts and what you've done for your breath control. Also, don't forget to check out a VO's Journey Elite Academy and the link below, 50% off. And if you need a voiceover, we'd love to help you at academyvoices.com. Talk to you guys later. Goodbye.